At around the age of 15, Ridley had started hanging out with vicious street gangs that would later become the Black Shadow organization. That was where he met Aaron Faust for the first time. Faust was just about a year younger than Ridley, and all the time, just as ruthless and cruel as Ridley, him and his gang would target various young students of their school off campus and bully them for pleasure, even force them to give up their personal things like money or jewelry. If they resisted or refused, Faust and his gang would sometimes force them at gunpoint to comply or be killed on the spot. Like Ridley's father, Faust and his gang had very good connections with various drug dealers and other powerful gangs in Middleton City. Crime was very bad back in the 1980s and 1990s for Middleton, so this had basically been a heyday for Ridley and Faust ever since the cops were so corrupted at the time and would take bribes from gang leaders and drug dealers to keep quiet. So they weren't anywhere near as corrupt as Gerald's criminal cops were, but they were still willing to let criminal gangs get away with their crimes if they paid them a high amount of money. Because of this, Ridley and Faust's gang grew stronger and stronger, and eventually dominating the criminal underworld within Middleton. By the age of 17, Ridley had become the new leader of Faust's gang, which he named the Black Shadow, and he had already gained a heavy number of allies in the criminal underworld. His host family had eventually discovered this, but didn't even dare considering going to the police, as Ridley threatened to have all of them killed if they so much as even tried ratting him out. He even paid corrupted cops to silence anyone who called him out on his criminal activity. He even seemed to be unstoppable at this point. Eventually, at the age of 20, Ridley desired even more just power. Within the criminal underworld, he wanted to control all over Middleton, and eventually the world itself. He had ruined many innocent lives throughout his criminal years in Middleton, including the lives of his host family. Ridley had framed his host mother of doing some really stuff with other men and as women as punishment for trying to protect her two daughters from him and his gang members. She ended up in prison as a result. Ridley had lost his father killed in a car bombing that his gang planned out when he planned on trying to escape Ridley and later in his gang, but his daughters suffer a fate far worse. Ridley had sold them to illegal porn films to be run by another gang and refusing any sexual advantages or even trying to run away. But other rival gangs who tried taking over his territory or even doing business with them would be hunted down and exterminated. Along with any family members they had, Ridley would make sure that his victims were killed slowly and painfully to make a brutal example to anyone who dared try to stand against him. Because of this, Ridley became one of the most feared crime bosses in all of Colorado. And very few other gangs didn't even consider trying to get on his bad side. At least they had want to face a similar fate. They just complied and surrendered to whatever demand Ridley made them to avoid being horrifically murdered. For 4 years, Ridley ruled the underworld criminal of Middleton until he turned 24. Then he ended up being caught by the FBI, smuggling a massive load of drugs over the border of Mexico. This happened to be 3 months after Ridley murdered his father, Gerald. After being caught, all of Ridley's crimes were exposed, and he was forced to confess to everything. Apparently, the FBI had been investigating the police corruption in Middleton City for the past several years, ever since the Black Shadow organization had built up for their criminal empire, and they had managed to uncover a ton of evidence within Middleton Police Station that they had been taking bribes from Blackwood Shadow just to stay quiet. And even worse, some of the corrupted cops had actually been assisting Black Shadow for their crimes, similar to how Gerald's corrupted cops operated back in Darkwood. Because of this, Ridley was hit with multiple counts of murder, assault, human trafficking, drug trafficking, mass murder, criminal conspiracy, and bribery. However, since the judge was taking the case was corrupt, Ridley's lawyers were able to get him a more lenient sentence, which was 20 years in prison without parole or bail. For the next 5 years, Faust had managed to avoid being caught by the FBI. During the raid on the drug of the house, they tried to find a way to bust Ridley out. He eventually did, with the help of several corrupt prisoners, guards, and even other Allied games 5 years after his imprisonment. Overnight, Ridley's allies cut the power in the prison, allowing him to escape, where he stole a prisoner transport bus and allowing Ridley to get away. Once he got far enough from the prison, Ridley abandoned the bus and fled into the hiding with his gang. They made their new base in the hideout underneath the city of Lawerton in the abandoned fallout shelter that had been built during the Cold War by the U.S. government, but it was abandoned after all it ended. There, Ridley erased all traces of his personal info, criminal records, and even created those false mental hospital documents, and even a fake version of his story. Some of the original criminal records still remained behind, though, and couldn't be erased entirely, so some of it was accurate to what Kim and Ron found in the flash drive. Ever since that day, Ridley and his organization operated the Shadows underground, hidden completely away from the public, believed to have gone permanently. Once the FBI busted them back in 1999, like Ridley, every member of the Black Shadow erased their identities to stay hidden from the public. It was as if one of them didn't exist anymore, or so they thought. Ridley's last name records still remained on the dark web, and since his uncle Todd Farkas most likely provided it to the courts once he was arrested by the FBI, after doing an undercover agent discover what Gerald had been doing down in the dark wood. Faust's records were permanently gone too, though, amongst the ever personal info on every Black Shadow organization member on the planet. Ridley's plan was to rebuild his organization from ground up. He'd only do it completely in a different way. Rather than operating out in the open, the Black Shadow began forming new alliances with other criminal organizations across the globe, eventually annexing them to the Black Shadow organization itself. They would one day infuriate the government and then manipulate and destroy them all within the work of Black Shadow informers all around the globe. Ridley had the ultimate plan. It was to one day take over the entire world and rule with the iron fist of Trainee, providing that he could be far better than his scumbag of a father and the other supervillains who tried to do the same thing. However, there was one thing that stood in Ridley's way, and that was global justice and Team Possible. Long before Kim and Ron were born, and Team Possible even had formed, their parents had once worked for global justice, and they provided to be a great threat to all villains and criminals across the globe. While they had not directly been a threat to Black Shadow, Ridley knew that someday descendants would most likely pose a threat to him, since they tend to deal with serious worldwide threats like Black Shadow, and he needed them gone. Kim Possible and Ron Stoppable have become quite famous all around the world, and global justice seems to favor them all a lot, Ridley continued. I've watched their activity for the last 5 years. I escaped from that horrid prison, and if my organization is to ever one day succeed and take over the world, they would need to be eliminated. My organization has grown very powerful over the last 5 years within the Shadows, and I have been tied to my annexee and find many criminal organizations into the Black Shadow. But now is still not the time to reveal ourselves to the world. Global justice may be dealt with first along with Team Possible, and only then I'll be finally able to annihilate the final phase of my plan to take over the planet. I have also considered hiring a few supervillains to my organization. Their abilities may prove more powerful in the long run. And I've had my eyes on every supervillain genius by the name of Dr. Drew Lipsky, or Draken as he calls himself. And when there is that Team X Go member that works for him, I believe Shigo is her name. Draken's intelligence and Shigo's superpowers could prove very useful to our cause. But what considers me is the fact that would mean possibly revealing my existence to the rest of the world. I don't know if I could trust them. At least not yet. If they start babbling about Black Shadow in public, and me and my organization could end up being exposed till my plan could be finally put into motion. Kim and Ron were shocked that Ridley had considered recruiting Dr. Draken and Shigo into his organization. At the time they were still villains, Kim and Ron couldn't even imagine the type of horrors Ridley may have been capable of if Shigo and Draken actually joined them. While Shigo often came up with better tactics than Draken, the superior intelligence and knowledge that possessed could be very deadly if used in the Black Shadow. but thankfully that never happened. No, perhaps it isn't a good idea. I can't risk my organization being exposed. Not before my plan reaches to completion. It's a slight loss, but it's better than risking my exposure, Ridley continued. My organization has grown quite large, but not to the point where I can make my move and finally claim this world as my own. As I said, I don't know how long it would take for Black Shadow to reach my intended goal, but I will not rest until I've reached it. Team Possible must also be eliminated before I could finally re-emerge as the powerful crime lord on the planet. And if Kim and her sidekick Ron Stoppable are alive, they could be my undoing. I shall continue to watch their activity and determine when I should eliminate them. But global justice comes first, and as I speak, the informers within global justice are already putting the work to undermine it. To weaken as well. Once I have learned of all I need to know, I shall finally work to eliminate global justice and bring them down. I've already have several factions of my organization working in several states of the U.S. and several more around parts of the globe to bring them every government down once their finally arrives. Ridley shifted his chair again and then said, "The town of Dark Woods was abandoned a year after my uncle Tard Farkas was tried and executed for being an accomplice to my pathetic father. Apparently, after his little secret projects were exposed to the public, like that sick human cattle farm of his, no one wanted to stay in that town. I returned to Dark Wood and planted the tapes you found in my old father's basement. He kept it in a safe hidden in the wall in there for cash and other things, but never used it. So what better way to put the good use into my video camera tapes in it? I know that someday someone will be looking for me in my organization and will eventually stumble upon this town after finding that name and location of it on the dark web, and it will lead me to their father's mansion. I've erased the existence of Dark Wood and scrubbed any traces of its history and my father's crimes off the surface web. But I did, in fact, leave some of it behind on the dark web, along with altered versions of my past to ensure that the ones looking for me would find this town with these tapes, and I know the ones they are." Ridley sneered and leaned forward, and then did something that made Kim and Ron's heart skip a beat. "Yes, I know that it is you two that are most likely watching this. Kim Possible and you two Ron Stoppable," Ridley said in a sinister voice. "I know how you are willing to both to do whatever it takes to protect the world and those around you. I know unwilling you are allowed to let your enemies escape in the grasp. So I have no doubt that it was you that found these tapes. Why else would I leave it in that info in the dark web? It's because I know that once I begin making my move and begin taking over the world, you both will try anything in your power to track me down, but you'll never find me, even with the info you undoubtedly have now. My organization grows stronger every day, and I have already begun the process of undermining global justice. Soon it will be more. My informers have been trained in many ways that will make you even the most trusted global justice agents seem innocent, when, and in reality, they are just double agents. Your region of heroism shall end soon, Kimberly. I shall shatter all you love and care for, and all that you know, all you would have seen soon the end. You will always say, look to the future, but I can assure you, your future is dark. Yes, you're in for a very dark future, and you can't stop it. In just a few years, Black Shadow will be powerful and will be enough to take down every government on the planet to bring the new world in order. My order. The region of Emperor Lily Farkas will soon begin." Ridley cackled loudly as the video ended, leaving Kim and Ron shocked and almost trembling. They realized that this tape had been recorded 5 years after Ridley broke out of prison, which was in 2004, 3 years before the Laudorian invasion and the graduation. He knew. Ron stuttered in shock. "He knew we'd find these tapes. Or suspected we would," Kim replied, just as shocked as Ron was. While Ridley didn't reveal the location of the abandoned bunker where Black Shadow's main hideout was, Kim and Ron realized that all this time Ridley had been living right under them in Middleton City, They also had a feeling that the entrance and exit was hidden somewhere that even global justice wouldn't even think to look. That was just about another horrifying issue in its own self. Ridley had slowly started undermining and infiltrating global justice once he escaped from prison, and it most likely had been completely compromised at this point. It had been 5 years since Ridley escaped from that prison, and Black Shadow had already grown stronger then. But now, he's unstoppable, Kim realized in horror. All this time, Ridley's organization has been growing more and more powerful. And after 5 years of the Black Shadow growing in strength and influence in the shadows, we've lost, Ron quickly said darkly. He's been watching us, Kim. Those monsters watching us and figuring us out all this time. And now that the Lordorian technology to help him as well, I don't even know how we can stop him. Even if by some chance that we found and we captured Ridley, his friend Aaron Foss would probably take his place as the new leader of Black Shadow, or another faction if it's somewhere else around the globe to do it. We'll need to get all this back to Dr. Director and fast, Kim replied, starting the engine to the coupe. Let's get out of this town and back to Middleton. As the car headed back to the abandoned road, Ron saw something simmering above in front of them. Then it quickly became visible and revealed itself. It was an intimidating-looking fighter ship, some sort of painted black with a red and in shadow widow-like style hourglass designed, painted red above him and under it. It had 4 extended wings that bore a light resembling with the X-wing. Painted on the wings was the logo of Black Shadow. Kim, look out! It's a Black Shadow fighter! Ron yelled. Kim hit the brakes and came to a stop just about 20 feet away from the imitating ship. Then a voice that suddenly erupted from the craft's pointed nose-like cockpit. It instantly knew who that voice was. Well. I figured you pathetic fools would be here snooping around in my old hometown. Ridley's voice erupted through his speaker system, built somewhere in the ship. Ridley, Ron hissed, quickly fleeing the red rage stirring within him as he reached for the door. Ron, don't! Kim yelled quickly, locking the doors. My, eager to try and stop me, Ron Stoppable? I know you want to, and I'm sure that dark force within you is urging you to do as well, Ridley mocked. Yes, I know what happened to you. After all, you nearly killed me there a week ago in the train yard and nearly destroyed my mech. But I know you wanted me dead, Stoppable. And yes, if you really want to know. Ridley paused and then just said something that made Kim and Ron's heart sink. I was who nuked Japan, he said coldly. Couldn't have those pathetic Naminochi ninjas gunning for me. Could I? Such a shame that your weak, pathetic little ninja girlfriend had to die. But then again, she, like her other ninjas, were just a group of weak, pathetic Japs. And it's disappointing that she didn't survive a blast. That's because me and my boys would have had to have so much fun with her. Just like what we did with that filthy bitch named Bonnie Rockweiler. You, Ron hissed, feeling his rage boiling like crazy. Ron, stop! Don't do it! You'll know what will happen if you give in to your anger again, Kim urged. Ron ignored her and quickly jumped out of the car, then quickly unleashed a torrent of mystical monkey power energy right at Ridley's ship, at the form of fireballs akin to Shigo's plasma power. It struck the energy shield around the ship, and then returned the fire by shooting several laser beams at him. But Ron quickly dodged them all, incredibly at fast speeds, and charged at Ridley's ship. Still holding back, Stoppable? I know you could do better than that, Ridley mocked, firing more shots at Ron. Ron's anger was reaching breaking point, and the red rage was becoming far more closer than ever to taking control of him again. But he held it back hard. Ron channeled into his rage and his mystical monkey powers, which made him much stronger and more powerful. You'll pay for what you've done, you monster! Ron roared, then charged up at Ridley's ship. With the force of a meteor, struck the energy shield with hard on his foot. It hit it with so much force that it sent Ridley's fighter ship across the sky, flying and into a rotted telephone pole. Sparks showered from the pole and fell into the large pit of dried grass, setting it ablaze. Ridley regained control of his fighter and spun it around to face Ron. I grew worried about you, Stoppable. And you think killing me could save the world? You have no idea how frickin' idea my powerful organizations become. Ridley hissed over the fighter's loudspeakers. You infiltrated every government, every law enforcement agency, and even global justice itself. You can't stop Black Shadow. Killing me will only delay the inevitable. Japan was simply an appetizer for the world riled up, pointing fingers at each other. You're aware of every government now currently at each other's throats, blaming each other for the nuclear attack? But they don't know the truth. You know why I did it. Ron simply looked at him. Ridley simply fired his lasers at Ron again. Then he dodged them. Who? Why? He yelled. Simple, Ridley said inside his fighter. To show you how powerless you truly are, and to show you what I'm capable of doing to those who dare to oppose me. With Laudorian technology in my hands, I could easily turn every nuke in the world into their own nations and destroy them if I so desire. Even Middleton. You can't win this battle, Ron Stoppable. You lost long before you started this fight. No, rather, you lost it long before you even graduated. I've invested in every form of infuriation, undermining and manipulation for the last 5 years, preparation for exactly this day. How can you hope to stop a criminal organization that doesn't even exist to the public? Ron knew that deep down Ridley was right about it all. His organization's power had grown and grown, and now it was powerful since not even the government was even being undermined and even manipulated. Every law enforcement agency had fallen to the victim of Ridley's evil hands, and had done it all without even revealing itself to the public. How could Team Possible hope to win a battle against an evil form of power like that? The simple answer was simple: they couldn't. This realization caused Ron to unleash the unimaginable fury of red lightning at Ridley's fighter, which actually penetrated the shields and struck the hull, causing extreme damage to his ship. Ridley fought his ship to keep control of the fighter, but nearly crashed into the ground within a few times. He glanced back up at Ron, whose eyes were now glowing red. The red rage had awoken him once again. Ron, stop it! Kim screamed at the top of her voice. Ron was about to unleash another fury of rage, lightning, when he suddenly felt a massive electrical joint rushing through his entire body. He then turned back and saw Kim had taser him gun in her hands. She had fired it at him to stunning force. Ron fell to the ground unconscious as Kim ran over to him. Ridley took aim and prepared to firing his weapons at the both of them, but then the alarm sounded for this cockpit. Warning, weapon system offline. Minor thruster damage detected. The fighter's male computer voice warned. Middle, some bitch. This isn't over. My plan is already unfolding, and my main showdown is yet to come in back into Middleton. We shall meet again, and it will be for the last time. That's my promise, Ridley sneered angrily. Then his fighter spun around and cloaked itself again. As soon as Ridley was gone, leaving Kim and Ron alone, the bushfire had already started to spread out throughout the field where the sparks had hit, and had begun to spread to some houses. Kim quickly dragged Ron to the backseat of the coupe, where Rufus sat in one of the cup holders. Scared quickly out of his mind, he had jumped out of Ron's pocket when Ron rushed out to fight Ridley. Kim placed him in the passenger seat, then rushed back into the coupe, driving off quickly, leaving the burning town behind. Ron was still out cold from the taser shot, which made Kim feel horrible. I'm sorry, Ron. I had no choice, Kim said as she headed past the entrance leading to Dart and out of Darkwood. The glow of the fire couldn't be seen growing bigger than before. In the distance, Clem glanced over in the rearview mirror. The sun had almost set, and night was upon them as they left Darkwood behind, now armed with more frightening knowledge than ever had before. However, Ridley had mentioned something about a showdown in Middleton, and Kim had a feeling that it couldn't be anything good. She feared what would awaited her and Ron back in Middleton as she drove through the darkening sky, more frightened than ever before.